Welcome to the Flavor Lab, where today I'm once again answering a question that nobody asked me. So today I want to know, what would it be like if we had peanut butter and jelly, but it was in the form factor of a pasta, like spaghetti and pasta sauce. So to do this, I want to make some noodles, and the noodles will be peanut butter flavored, and actually not flavored, but they'll actually have peanut butter in them. And then the sauce will be just basically a strawberry jam. And I'm gonna make peanut butter spaghetti and then just top it with jelly. I don't know about this one. Let's just see how it goes. All right, then let's get to it. All right, let's go ahead and get started by making that peanut butter pasta I just mentioned. So to start off with, we're gonna need about 290 grams of all-purpose flour. Now, if you have pasta flour, feel free to use that, but for a recipe like this where we're kind of messing around, I think it's totally fine to use all-purpose flour. And in the end, the noodles turned out okay, so I think we're good here. Next, let's talk peanut butter. So here I'm gonna be using this P2B dehydrated peanut butter stuff. Essentially, you can add a little bit of water to this and it turns into a peanut butter paste. And the reason I'm using that is because I really don't wanna mess with the moisture ratio. We don't really wanna add a lot of water to this pasta when making it. Now, if you don't have access to P2B, a few weeks ago, I made a video where I actually make a very similar thing, which is basically just a kind of defatted peanut butter. And how I do this is you basically just roast some peanuts, you crush them up, and then you kind of use paper towels to soak up as much peanut oil as possible. Then you just grind this up, and then basically you've got a very similar thing to what I have here. So in essence, I could have just added that, but I was going down a lazy route. I decided to just add this kind of pre-made product, which turned out okay. So if you do have access to this, this is a really nice, easy way of doing it. Now, as far as how much to add, initially I decided to go with about 50 grams of this P2B powder, but then, I wasn't totally satisfied with this, so I decided to add more later, but we'll get to that. So additionally, we need to add about 3 grams of salt, and just be careful to know that, the P2B does have salt within it, so you don't want to add too much salt. All right, so I decided to just mix everything together using a fork and really just try to make sure everything's equally distributed. Then I was not really satisfied with the amount of peanut butteriness of this flour, so I decided to add a little bit more P2B powder, and then I gave that a mix. And once again, I was kind of not super satisfied, so I decided to add another little shake in there. Now, if I were to guess, and based on how much is left in the bottle, I'm assuming I used somewhere around 80 grams of P2B powder total. But if you use a little bit more, a little bit less, I think you still end up with a pretty good pasta. All right, now that we have all the dry ingredients, we can actually try to start making our pasta. And if you want to be romantic and do the old school cool method, you can just pour this out onto a cutting board and kind of form that into a little mound and then make a little divot in the middle for an egg to go into. Now, speaking of eggs, we're gonna need 2 whole eggs and then about 3 egg yolks. And once you get all the eggs together, just give it a good mix until it turns into a nice eggy, yolky, runny mixture. And just really trying to make sure that you break up all the membranes, just kind of making sure that it's all one smooth, homogeneous little runny mixture. Okay, so now it's time where I was actually like, all right, I'm gonna try to do what all the cool kids do, which is just pour a little bit of this egg yolk into our little mound and use a fork to kind of mix in the edges and kind of mix up the flour with the egg yolk in the middle. But my pasta making skills are definitely not near the top, and I rolled a natural 1 on my dexterity check, and then basically this caused a eruption from this little egg flour volcano. It was a total mess, and yeah. And I'm just not good at making pasta this way. If you are, kudos to you and totally awesome, but I should have just stuck with what the recipe initially stated, which was to use a food processor. So I'm just gonna kind of give up and put everything into a food processor. And that's just sometimes you lose in life, and you gotta do it the not cool way. So next, I'm just basically gonna give this a pulse and just kind of really make sure that I break up all of this dough until it's, kind of in pieces and the eggs and flour are kind of as well mixed as they're gonna be. And at this point, we need to add a little bit of oil, and that's gonna help kind of bind everything together. And you really just wanna go by eye here. So initially the recipe called for olive oil, but for this recipe, I thought, hey, peanut oil. So I'm gonna be adding a little bit of peanut oil to this and just kind of, giving it a pulse, seeing if it comes together. Once it starts to come to one giant chunk and forming itself into a big blob, we know that we're done with our pasta. And at this point, it's just a matter of kind of pulling this off, putting it onto our cutting board, carefully not trying to cut yourself with the blade of the food processor, and then just kind of giving it a good press to make sure that it all sticks together. And thankfully for me, that was the case. My pasta became one nice little dough ball. And that's pretty much it for the first step. So what we're gonna need to do now is let this sit for at least an hour, preferably a little bit longer. And what that's gonna do is it's gonna allow time for the gluten to form within the little dough ball. And that's gonna give the pasta its nice stretchy, chewy texture that we associate with pasta. So I'm just gonna wrap this with plastic wrap and then just kind of set this off to the side for right now. Okay, so in the meantime though, while that gluten is forming, let's make our strawberry jelly that's gonna go on top. So for this, I'm gonna be using about a pound of strawberries, and I'm just gonna cut up the tops and then just kind of cut these into quarters. And if you don't wanna have to make your own strawberry jelly from scratch, I won't judge you at all for just buying it. So I just cut this into quarters and then just put this into a bowl. Once I've collected all of my strawberries, it's time to actually add the next ingredient. Now, once our strawberries are all cut up, we need to add the juice of one whole lemon. So just go ahead and kind of squeeze that in there and just pour it in with our strawberries. Now for a real recipe for strawberry jelly, you might use something like pectin or gelatin or something like that to actually thicken the strawberry juice into a jelly. But this recipe calls for sugar. And it might have been a mistake. I'm not sure I would have followed this recipe if I'm gonna make strawberry jelly next time. For this recipe, I'm using a buttload of sugar. That's the actual amount. And then I'm just gonna add this to the strawberries and just pour this on top of the strawberries, along with our, with the lemon juice that's already in there. Now, what we need to do now is actually kind of what's called macerate this, but essentially we just need to crush the strawberries and actually bring out the juices. And additionally, the sugar is gonna help kind of keep everything in place, as well as kind of just help crush up that strawberry and really tear into it. And it's almost acting like sandpaper at this point. Just at some point, just keep dumping in the sugar until you have everything in there. And we're just gonna keep crushing this with this kind of mallet until everything is in kind of this formation. Now, if there's still a little bit chunks of strawberries left, don't worry, those will get kind of subsumed into the next step, which is to actually heat this mixture. So what we're gonna do now is we're literally just gonna pour this whole thing into a saucepan over medium heat and let this come up to basically a boil. What's gonna happen is the sugar and water concentration is actually gonna form basically the first candy stage, which is the syrup stage. We're gonna bring this to about 220 degrees Fahrenheit or about 105 degrees Celsius. And essentially what we're doing here, as I said before, is we're really just making a candy syrup. So this, as I said, was maybe a sweeter version of jelly than I would have preferred, and I might have done it differently in the future, but I did end up with something that looked cool, so maybe that's all that matters. Go ahead and very carefully pour this off into a glass container, and once everything's been poured into the glass container, we can just kind of put this into the fridge and let it cool and move on to the next step, which is to continue with our peanut butter pasta. Hopefully at least 1 hour has elapsed, and now it's time to actually make our pasta. So the first thing I'm gonna do is actually break this up into quarters and then actually take basically each one of these quarters and then just roll this out with a rolling pin to kind of, something like a little bit of a little pancake of dough. Okay, so now it's time to actually make the pasta. So I'm gonna bust out my pasta maker, which I rarely ever use. And I'm just gonna clamp this to a surface, which in my case is this cutting board, and that's just for filming reasons. But basically the idea is here, we're gonna just kind of feed in this little dough pancake we made into the pasta maker at the thickest kind of spacing. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna lay that back out, and then we're gonna fold this into a little envelope, and then we're gonna run it through the pasta maker again. And this is essentially just gonna help kind of make sure that everything's uniform and that we're rolling through the pasta maker in kind of an even way. And then from this point, it's really just a matter of going down one spacing interval at a time and basically running it through the pasta maker once at each interval and just increasing the dial, which in my case basically decreases the spacing between the rollers. And this is gonna make a progressively thinner and thinner and thinner pasta. And eventually what we're gonna end up with is a nice long sheet like this. Now, if you wanna help kind of reduce sticking, which wasn't really an issue with my pasta, but it may be with yours, is just add a little bit of flour between each one of the layers, and that's just gonna help make sure that it doesn't really stick. And then what we're gonna do is just kind of decide on a good length, and I thought this was a pretty good uniform, even length, and I'm just gonna cut the sheet into these even little segments. Then the next step is to make some actual pasta. So what I have here additionally is this little pasta strip thing. Now you could cut this yourself if you wanted to, but I'm not very good with that kind of stuff, so I decided to just use the pre-attached pasta maker. And so essentially what I'm gonna do is just basically run this through the spaghetti setting, slowly try to catch this as I run one of these cut segments through the spaghetti strainer. Once you do, just kind of pull it out, twist it, and then place it on the cutting board. I ran this on the spaghetti width of the cutter, but I also did do a little bit of linguine as well, just to see which one I would want to use better. Once all of our pasta has been rolled out and we've got nice little spaghettis, I decided to just kind of break this out and let the pasta dry ever so slightly before we move on to the next step, which is to actually cook the pasta. So to cook the pasta, it's literally just a matter of heating up a pot of boiling water and then adding some salt, and then it's just a matter of adding the pasta into the boiling water, and we're gonna let this cook for about somewhere around 2 minutes, and at which point it's time to just drain it. And then I like to just kind of give this a little bit of a fry and some melted butter. So I just added a knob of butter to a pan. I let that melt, and then I just tossed in all of that pasta. Now I admit that's probably way too much butter. I don't know what I was thinking. I had been like a long day filming, and I think I was just like, yeah, that seems like a good amount of butter. Once everything is all kind of coated in butter, it's time to plate this up. And then it's time to add our strawberry jelly on top, and also add a few little mini marshmallows because America. And I thought it looked kind of cute. Anyways, so that's the completed pasta, and I think it looks pretty darn cool. All right, so it's the moment of truth. Let me actually just taste this and see if it tastes any good. It definitely looks bizarre. The noodles really kind of almost look like whole wheat pasta, and the entire time I was making these, it totally smelled like peanut butter. So let's see what this is like. That's really weird. I actually expected this to not be so bad. It's not bad. It's definitely very sweet. It's got all the flavors of peanut butter and jelly, which I should have pre-qualified. I'm not a super huge peanut butter and jelly fan, but it's very weird. It just doesn't taste correct. I have no other way to describe it other than just like everything is there. It's just not how it should be. The noodles themselves are actually pretty good, and I would recommend making those, but I definitely don't know if I recommend topping it with strawberry jelly. I don't know. This is definitely a weird one, and thank you for watching. And if you're not subscribed, I'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe, or even better, if you could share this with somebody who might enjoy this kind of weird stuff. Anyways, that's it for this week, and I'll see you guys again soon. All right, bye.